What's up, guys? I'm Han. This is Han Talks First, the Star Wars podcast you're looking for. It's a different time than normal. Sorry about that, but we're here, and I'm joined by a guest today. You remember when I told you guys that I would have a guest on the show, and it never happened? And then I told you again the following week that it would happen, and it still never happened. Well, he's finally here today. I'm joined again. It's been a while, but he's been on the show twice before, right?
Right.
Twice before, and so some of you might know him. This is
I'm so excited.
Lewis Woods. We're actually doing it a little differently. So we have two cameras going on, but we're actually in the same room, which is actually kind of hard to believe because the screens look so different. But see, it's proof that we're in the same room. And Chris, for those of you that know, Chris is in the background too. That's her hand right there. So, with that being said, we're having I have a different setup going on with the audio and video. So if something is off, if anyone's watching live, let me know so I can try and fix it while we're here. And let me turn my notifications off. But yeah, so today we're talking about the filmmaking of Star Wars. This episode is titled Star Wars Film School. So we're going to talk about filmmaking. We're going to relate it back to Star Wars, talk about some of the achievements they come up with. And hey, Lewis, could you, behind you on your left is my dirty laundry. Can you like push it onto the floor?
On the floor?
Yeah. Okay, there we go. That was distracting. My bad. But yeah, before we jump into anything, really, I'm gonna let Lewis take a second, introduce himself, and let you guys know a little bit about him. So, take it away, my friend.
Nice. Yeah. No. I'm from North Carolina. Moved out to LA to pursue filmmaking. I want to become a director, but I'm currently an actor, a writer. Yeah. I just love movies. I love films. I love TV shows. I love anything that's visual.
Yeah, and that's kind of why he's here today, because he's a local LA filmmaker, and we'll get his point of view, some experience, some things maybe you're working on too, and then you can share your perspective on things, and maybe that'll be a little bit more insightful for people out there. And yeah, so for anyone who's been listening for a while, I haven't been doing the Bad Batch reviews because I haven't watched the last two episodes. So I know I need to get on it. The most recent one I did watch was just so uninteresting to me. It kind of discouraged me from wanting to watch, but I'm gonna do it as soon as I can. But until then, we're gonna talk about some other great Star Wars stuff. And since we didn't do the show on Monday, we're gonna go ahead and start this episode off with our first weekly segment, which is Star Wars Replay. So here is this week's episode of Star Wars Replay. Enjoy.
Star Wars Replay!
Star Wars Replay is where we replay major moments and events that happened this week in Star Wars history. And this week, back in 1942, Harrison Ford, our very own Han Solo, was born. Back in 1948, Ben Burtt, who was the sound designers for the original trilogy and the editor of the prequel movies, was born. Back in 1961, Forrest Whitaker, who plays Saw Gerrera in Rogue One, is also born. And this week in 1976, filming for A New Hope, the very first Star Wars movie, wrapped shooting. And finally, back in 2012, Knights of the Old Republic Collection was released for PC platform. That's it for Star Wars Replay. Tune in next week to find out what major moments and events happened next week in Star Wars history.
So a lot of great things happened this week in Star Wars history. Of course, most significantly, the birthday, Harrison Ford. So happy birthday to Harrison out there. One of our favorite Star Wars characters. So we got a lot to talk about today. And I'm mostly curious to hear from you about your experience as being a filmmaker, since it's kind of something that isn't, it's relatively new as far as being on the other side of the camera, or at least for the past couple of years, because you started off as an actor and stage and theatrical stuff,
Right.
and now it's kind of transitioned more towards movies and cinema and the art of that. So I'm curious to hear what made the change, and also how, like, what you're working on now, how you're growing, and what new things you've learned. And make sure to have your mic up a little bit facing you.
Yes, of course. ASMR. Hey. Yeah. It's like preschool, honestly, filmmaking. No, I'm joking. How many people would kill me for saying that? No, I started off as a musical theater nerd. Started off on stage, singing, performing, only on stage. And then I think the movie that inspired me to become a filmmaker, this is so embarrassing, but The Chronicles of Narnia, not the Disney versions, but the BBC version. Were so good. Oh my God. I was just like, look, like, oh, it was
That was
so
how
great.
I was introduced to.
Yeah,
they were great.
Yeah, the puppetry, like,
were
was
fantastic.
so amazing. The scoring, so great. Obsessed. And then of course the Disney version came out and like became even more obsessed with the story and everything. And I forget what is his name. Oh my God, like I'm so bad with names, but the same director of Shrek, obsessed with him. And that kind of led into this whole like world of wanting to become a filmmaker. Even Lord of the Rings, like same, like filming on location is like one of my favorite things. And I think it kind of inspired me to like, it's like an avenue to also travel,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of actors who are like, I want to go to Hawaii, so let's make a movie and base it in Hawaii. And I was just like, like that's so cool. But
Well, it's kind of like Adam Sandler.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Adam Sandler, he's literally said that the reason why his movies take place in different areas of the world is just because he wants to travel there. So that's his excuse, which is kind of sad, because that means it's all paid for. If he wants to take a family trip to Hawaii, he just calls up Jennifer Aniston, like, yo, let's just go with it, and like the Drew Barrymore one, when they went to Africa.
Drew Barrymore, oh my gosh, she's so important.
Just because they wanted to go to Africa,
right?
But yeah, it helps. It lets you travel. So,
yeah,
sorry,
and
go
like
ahead.
no, I don't know. It just like there's something really satisfying about seeing something come to life on film. Like I can't explain it. Like especially when a book turns into something very visual and beautiful. Because I have the biggest imagination, so I love it. I love it. I don't care what avenue of filmmaking I'm in, as long as I'm a part of it, as long as my hands is on top and like doing something and creating, like, is super exciting.
Well, it's being a filmmaker. This is something I told Omar when we were working on Mind Film. For those of you that don't know, Omar was the editor on my little short film that I've been working on, that I've told you about. But when I was working with him on that, when we were in the editing room, one thing I said to him was like, because he was like, it was his first film he ever edited ever. And he's like just getting into filmmaking and stuff.
He did an amazing job. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
He did do a good job, all things considered. And he was saying how great it was to just create something from nothing. And I was like, well, this part of the movie making process is kind of like playing God, because
maybe that's the reason why I like filmmaking.
The God complex.
My ego.
But if you think about it, everything's shot, everything exists already, but you get to tell the story how it goes. So technically it's like a multiverse, because you can change an ending with the shot footage if you wanted to.
Exactly.
And the editor is in charge, and they're like playing God, picking how the story is going to play out. Right. And you can have different endings. It's like a multiverse. So if you wanted to change your mind, you can go back and be like, oh, I don't like how she turned her head there. And it's weird how we're like, creating something from nothing, but it's almost like a living thing in that way,
right? Where
you are, you're conducting it, you're orchestrating it, whatever you want to call it. But it's an interesting process. And for those of you listening today, it's a Star Wars podcast. We're going to try and relate it back to Star Wars as much as we can. And the first thing I want to kind of start off with is well, there's many things, but like, we could talk about editing and relating that to Star Wars, which is really important. It's one of the reasons why it was nominated for Best Picture in 1978. We could talk about production value. Star Wars films started off with little to no production value, but made it look like it was something really big and grand. And then, of course, sound is really important in Star Wars and created such an importance to it in overall over cinema. And then also different types of symbolism. We'll talk about some shooting differences between film and digital and how Star Wars has changed that, and also the cultural impact of film and of Star Wars and movie making in general. So starting off with that, let's start off with cultural impact of movies. With Star Wars, for example, it changed aesthetics and narratives of Hollywood films when Star Wars came out, because there weren't mythological tales such as Star Wars or hero's journey tales at that time. There was just recently written the book Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, which is now taught in every American film or American writing course, or what is it called? Expository writing, like high school level. And so that's one thing that George Lucas discovered before it went into the American curriculum was hero's journey, and he put it to film. He's one of the first, often said to be the first because of its impact on society, but the way he did it, the way he brought it to life was something unique and special, and no one had really seen it before. And he also pushed for meaningful focus on dramatic conflict in these movies, such as themes and special effects, and then the transition to CGI. And of course, the main pop cultural impact was the opening credits and how he did away with them. And before Star Wars, the credits of a film were always played at the beginning of a movie, and then afterwards that doesn't exist anymore. And part of that was he wanted the audiences to jump right into the action and feel the wave of this new energy that was Star Wars right off the bat. And that was by opening the movie with and the big Star Wars words, which was something that took all audiences by surprise at the time. So those are just a few examples, but can you think of anything else that, whether it's Star Wars or movies in general, that have created such huge cultural impacts? Like another example would be Lord of the Rings, of course. So I want to hear from you.
For Star Wars, since this is a Star Wars podcast, I feel I'm such a fangirl of puppetry, and just the way the puppetry in the first 3 movies, fantastic. Like, and I kind of wish we would just go back to practical effects, but it really just kind of like jump started a whole new way of filmmaking. I'm not sure if there's anything else before that besides like to use like Jim Henson's puppetry. Was it Jim Henson actually?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just amazing. I feel like that's kind of like something that was very big and important.
Yeah. I can't think of anything prior that would have used it as much as Star Wars did.
Right.
But definitely after, more people did start to use practical, like John Carpenter in The Thing and other movies. Can't think of off the top of my head, but John Carpenter is a good example.
What's the timeline of like Dark Crystal? And
Dark Crystal came out in 85, I think.
Okay,
so that was a little later. But I was going to ask if you saw the TV show Rise of the Resistance.
Yes, of course.
Beautiful,
love it. Is there a season 2 coming out, or
Netflix canceled it?
Of course they did.
I know.
What, for the Hype House? What is that?
Well, one thing me and Chris were saying was Disney should pick it up. Disney should pick up the Dark Crystal because they own Jim Henson Company,
of course.
So why? I mean, Netflix may still hold a license to Dark Crystal, so maybe that's why they can't make it.
You want to know a funny story? Actually,
I would love to.
It's now like coming to my mind. Sorry guys, it's like, what time is it? Like 10:19. I'm like can barely talk. But I used to work on cruise lines, and one of the locations that we would go to, destinations, is St. Martin. And one day I was just walking down the beach and going to like the village just by the beach, and I see this shop, and it's dedicated to Star Wars. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird, like this random mountain in this random like island village in St. Martin. And the guy who owns the shop actually created the Yoda puppet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
Just
so
random,
bizarre, yeah.
like in St. Martin, like I think on the French side or the Dutch side.
How does
St.
that come
Martin.
up in conversation? Like, how did you find that out? Was he just like, "Hi, creator of Yoda Puppet"?
No, he wasn't there, but like,
Oh, I
it's
see,
like,
I
it's
see.
like a museum or something. Like I wish we could pull it up. Like I wish we had one of those things to where we can like
I can.
we can like
Yeah.
let's see if we can like search it. I'll keep talking, but like no, like I think he was the original creator of the like like feel the force, like that one. What is that? What is that monologue?
You talking about the do or do not line? Is that
Or
what
do
you're talking
not try. Feel it.
about? You said in St. Martin,
Yeah, in St. Martin. Right?
Phillipsburg,
Say again.
Phillipsburg, St. Martin.
The island in the Caribbean.
I think so. I think I have it here. Nope,
You have it?
that is not it.
Uh-oh.
I don't know.
I swear to God, this is a thing. I swear. Unless like I was teleported to a
No, I
different
believe you.
dimension.
It's so niche. It'll probably be hard to find. I mean, if
Yeah.
you type Yoda puppet,
Yeah,
St.
Yoda
Martin, Star
puppet in
Wars,
St. Martin.
a
Yeah,
billion
I
things will
swear,
pop
like,
up.
Let me look at. No, I'm not.
Yeah. No,
Maybe
we'll
we can
keep it
put
in
a-
mind.
Yeah, put a link or something.
But and with that too, with cultural significance, anywhere you go, you're gonna find something Star Wars or someone. Everyone's seen Star Wars.
Of course.
If they haven't watched the movies, if at least they know, everyone knows who Darth Vader is. Everyone knows
Yeah, of
who's Yoda is, right? And it's one of those things too. And it was creating iconography in film history. One of the things that was really significant when Disney bought Lucasfilm and they announced that they were going to make Star Wars movies was they recently announced Kathleen Kennedy as the new president of Lucasfilm and that she was going to shepherd the next movies going forward starting in 2015. And one of the things she said that George Lucas told her to keep in mind when creating new Star Wars was that when you're creating new characters, when you're creating new stories and places and things like that, everything you make, audiences should be able to recognize it by a silhouette. That's iconography. That's when you make something iconic. Because if you think about it, if you think of Yoda in just a silhouette, everyone can point it out. Darth Vader, you can point Jar Jar Binks. Everything is iconic in that way. Did you think about it?
Yeah.
Unless you mistake him for Goofy, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But
it's just the eyes, right?
Yeah. And so that's one thing too that Star Wars has impacted through culture as well. And I think a lot of ever since Star Wars came out in 1977, tons of movies and television shows tried to copy Star Wars, and they didn't do it right because they thought it was about ships in space. They thought it was about explosions.
Spaceballs.
They thought it was about talking backwards. People do, but it wasn't. It was about the myth. It was about the iconicness of it, and about the creativity of storytelling, and of course, practical effects. So yes, cultural impact of Star Wars. If you guys have any examples, if you're watching live, put it down in the comments below. And also you can interact with us. If you have any questions you want to throw in there, maybe ask me or ask Lewis, you can throw that in the chat as well. We will keep that in mind going forward. Now, since we are in the middle of the show here, I just wanted to remind all of our listeners, there is a tipping option. If you're interested, it's at www.streamelements.com/HanTalksFirst/tip. You can support this channel by donating and submitting a question, and we will read it on the show and use it as a main topic. So thanks for doing that as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the influence Star Wars had for camera evolution, which sounds weird to say, but a lot of the times now when we have, global communication and camera technology in our pockets, it's hard to think of a time when that didn't exist. And Star Wars is actually one of the reasons why we got cameras so easily accessible, because they wanted things to be able to shoot behind the scenes with, but they also wanted to make that transition from film to digital really quickly.
Oh, wow.
And Star Wars had a direct impact on cameras such as the Alexis and the Dragon.
Oh, okay.
And also the Mark II and the Red. So really big names today, but at the time was kind of like, you wouldn't think those would be household names to cinematographers or just people at home. That would be so easily accessible to independent, local, small-time filmmakers like us and any of you who are watching.
Yeah, I filmed my short on the Alexa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
What was
Star Wars?
out of speaking of camera, out of whatever, what's the name of the one you just shot with Alexis?
The short,
Yeah.
it's called Somnium.
And so
Dream.
between
Wow.
that and other projects that you've
Yeah.
shot with different cameras on, like the Red, which we shot the music video on.
Right.
What are some differences you see, some similarities? What do you prefer? What stands out to you?
I'm one of those directors that is still learning and very unseasoned. So I am still trying to figure out my favorite.
Yeah.
Currently. I know what type of lens I like. Anamorphics all the way. But camera wise, I'm still it's really, I really like the Alexa, but a Red is always good.
Yeah.
But I'm still learning. I don't really know. I feel like maybe it just really depends on the project and the story. Like
with the Reds, David Fincher is actually who's responsible for making those popular.
Nice.
All of his movies are shot on Reds.
Nice.
At least starting with Panic Room, if you've ever seen that, with Jodie Foster and
I do know it.
Bell. Is that her name?
Kristen Bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was his first film shot on digital, and he used a Red.
Okay.
And ever since then, he's only shot on Red cameras, and
they're beautiful. I'm just not sure if it's my favorite.
Also, the Hobbit movies were shot on Red. I think so. I know people don't like those movies, but
no, I love it. Like, I'm obsessed with the Hobbit.
But digital filmmaking is huge today. It's in some cases the only option. It's really cheap. It's easily accessible. And there was a time period when that was not an option.
I prefer film,
when it was people thought it was crazy to do. Yeah.
I prefer film. I think that's the reason. I think that's the reason why I can't think of a.
I definitely prefer film.
Yeah.
And we can get into reasons why first, but the first real full-length feature film that was shot digitally was Attack of the Clones. It was really important for George Lucas to, when he was making these Star Wars movies, that it was one, telling a good story, and two, pushing the technological advancements of movie making and implementing as much technology as you can into telling a story. And there was one great saying by George Lucas, where it was, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was something like, a good story isn't told through great visual effects, but great visual effects can amplify the story you're trying to tell, or something like that.
That makes sense.
Which is kind of ironic because people say that he oversaturated the prequel movies with visual effects. But it's interesting that it was the first movie shot completely digital, and it was actually shot on a Sony HDW F900, which was made specifically for Star Wars. They had to commission the first real digital camera of all time. And what's funny about that, when you think digital camera, you think battery packs, right?
Right.
So the first digital cameras, especially for Star Wars, there was no batteries that could power that. You had to plug it into a generator. And one of the things that the cinematographer said on set of The Phantom Menace, I say Phantom Menace because they were trying to implement digital technology during The Phantom Menace, but it wasn't quite there yet. So they did half of The Phantom Menace on digital and half on 35mm film. Really? So, yes.
Crazy.
Yeah. And
I'm gonna have to rewatch and like see if I can.
You can tell which parts. It's interesting. I wish I might be able to bring up some examples on the screen here, but I remember what I was saying. So on the set of The Phantom Menace, one of the cinematographers was saying throughout 100 years of filmmaking, of cinematography, that it's actually existed in motion picture, throughout the past 100 years, people have been trying to get the camera off a tripod, to get it off of the cables. And it's kind of reverse evolution, because once the film camera was able to get off of cables to be powered, they switched to digital, and digital needed to be plugged in. So it's kind of ironic how it worked that way.
Right.
And it's kind of like evolution, but taking a step back at the same time. Right. So the cinematographer on The Phantom Menace was actually upset that they had to plug everything in and use cables, because they were actually restricted to movement. So if you look at if you watch The Phantom Menace, the shots that are static and the shots that don't move, those are digitally shot, which you would think it would be the opposite. But you can see how quick the technology advanced from 1999 to 2002 when Attack of the Clones came out, because that whole entire movie, Attack of the Clones, is just moving all over the place.
No.
So it's crazy what George Lucas, Lucasfilm, ILM was able to achieve in just 3 years. And people thought they were easy to do it.
What's wrong with James Cameron? Why is it taking him so long to get these
The
Avatar movies out? Like, catch up with the technology, dude.
When did Avatar come out? 2009, right?
Yeah.
It's
Come on,
12 years.
Do we care? Do we care anymore? Come on, guys. Do we care?
I'm
Do we care anymore?
I'm the last person on earth who cares about Avatar 2.
I love Avatar. Don't get me wrong,
but this whole talk of digital versus film leads me to my next big question, which is 4K versus HD. Do you have opinions?
I mean, 4K.
I have an unpopular opinion, which I think 4K is a scam. I think
What?
I think 4K at this moment in time is utterly useless.
Why?
Well, for one, if we look at how people consume content, it's either on their phone or on their laptop.
I already see where you're going.
You can get 4K on your laptops and through a external monitor like the one I'm using now or something like that.
Like you see on my pores.
But if you like for my short film that I just shot, and I'm sure yours too, was shot in 4K, maybe even 6K for you since it was an Alexa.
I think it was
just 4K.
I think it was just 4K.
So when I upload it to a platform, whenever I'm allowed to do that, which is either Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, I can only upload it in 1080p for certain providers because they only take a however big enough file, and in some cases it's only 5 gigabytes, especially if you're doing a festival rotation or things like that. So even then people won't get to see the full resolution of the product you shot.
Well, whose fault is that?
That's a great question, but that's my point. At this time, I don't think 4K is really necessary.
It's not.
And even if you're uploading whether it's a music video, short film, whatever, usually in today's age, it's all streaming, and streaming to buffer a 4K video or even a 2.1K video, which is also very popular on YouTube, is in certain areas of this country, especially, you can't even access 4K. It's usually the highest resolution is 2.1K. So it's weird there, but also it's different between film and digital. If you shoot on film, it's automatically it's automatically it's higher than 4K. It's way higher than 4K.
But I just love film so much because like it also just puts the actors almost in a trance once they hear that like that noise that it makes. Sorry. it almost like psychonaut, like, oh, we have this one take, like we need to like get this.
Yeah, because this is like
it just
it's not like
the
we
actor
can
like feel like it feels like a movie. It feels like Hollywood, like, you know, and it's
because it's like well, if we don't get this, that means there's going to be more money spent on another reel.
It's like the actors get their sugar honey iced tea together.
Right. And
what were you
the other thing about like 4K versus HD, relating it back to Star Wars, the prequel movies cannot be remastered in 4K because the digital technology at the time couldn't have that much processing power.
George Lucas,
so
fucked up.
The highest resolution you can ever watch Revenge of the Sith is 1080p, which is standard definition. Actually, technically standard is 720. Your camera will come back on. It does that sometimes. But if someone ever tries to tell you here's a 4K version of Revenge of the Sith, they're scamming you. It's impossible to get a 4K resolution of that movie, which is interesting too, because it kind of lessens the quality of the film if you think about it, because right now everything's advertised as 4K. Get the 4K steelbook set, or create this in 4K. You can even shoot on your iPhone in 4K, things like that. So I think that's kind of funny too.
Well, who wants to see Jar Jar in 4K?
I think a lot of people do. I'm just kidding. But anyway, you had something you wanted to talk about, which was some kind of pitch. So I'm interested to hear about this pitch idea you have for
I
Star
don't know
Wars.
why. So, because I'm thinking of like, let's try. Have they won an Oscar like for like best film?
Star Wars?
Star
No.
Wars, yeah. So I'm like, how can we do that? Like, how can we get a best picture, right? Like A24 is killing the game. So like, what if we took like an A24 type of style category movie, but
Okay.
Star Wars, right? And so I'm thinking it needs to be very minimal. Like we can't have these like big production, like blasting up a world, like shooting up, like like it needs to be like small, like almost like Peanut Butter Falcon, Boyhood, Moonlight, La La Land, right? So what I'm thinking
Is La La Land A24? It is?
is it? No. I was just going off in my head. It's not
Oh,
A24.
okay.
Midsummer, right?
I was about to say, it's so weird for-
A24, right? What is it called? Mid 25 or 25? Mid 90s. What? We're nowhere close to 25. Mid 24. Mid 90s, like these movies. So like, let's turn that into a Star Wars film. Very indie. Let's bring it back on film, right? Chewie falls in love. Chewie falls in love with an Ewok. Amazing, right? Very your face. It sounds dumb.
I was picturing it and I didn't like it. But I guess it's just as corny as Chewie falling in love with Maz Kanata. So I
Right.
think
Right. But it doesn't have to be like like in love. Like it could be like friendship, right? Their journey, like a journey somewhere.
So you said to be shot on film, and
On film.
the
Very taken back.
all the Disney movies, Star Wars movies have been shot on film.
Okay, great.
It's
I'm
more
still
than that.
Padawan. I'm still learning. So
It's more than that. But go like what are you talking about? Are you talking about also tone?
the
Is that what you're saying?
tone, like like that tone.
So
like
what is your
grittiness.
critique of Disney Star Wars tone? Is it too Disney-fied? Is that what you're saying?
No, I was just giving the pitch. I wasn't critiquing Disney or Star Wars.
Well, Mitchell in the chat agrees with you. He would watch an A24 style Star Wars.
Thank
movie.
you. Like it doesn't have to be that storyline, but it needs to be something just subtle. Like you know what I mean? Like a very side story that's not too big. Like an indie movie, right? A princess falls in love or something like friendships learning the lesson of forgiveness, but in Star Wars.
So,
Like
you
very
think
taken back.
we've been kind of exploring this universe in a way too broad stroke? You kind of
Exactly. Let's bring it back.
bring back the
Which is why Rogue One
reins a
was
little bit.
amazing, right? Because it was so brought back.
So that kind of goes against like the original
saying?
point of Star Wars, right? Does it? I'm not going against your thought. I'm just curious how you because the whole first it was originally developed to be like kind of like a serialized old 1950s 60s type of matinee on television for kids almost, and so big adventure, but also kind of campy. So
Got you.
are you, when you say to kind of bring it down a little bit, focus on smaller stories, do you mean in the way where it's less ensemble and more like character focused, or staying on one planet, like at one
More
location
character
type thing?
focus.
So
I
character
think I because the reason why I love film so much is because you can take everyday life and just put it on the screen. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's this moment in time. Right. So I think like finding a moment, the smallest moment of Star Wars. This is why they would never hire me in their creative team, because apparently but yeah, no, I feel like Star Wars is so big already, right? So I don't think it's gonna harm. I don't think it's going to damage the brand. I think literally just finding a moment and focusing on that moment.
I think that's where the sequel trilogy kind of missed the mark. Is each movie they tried to introduce like 10 new more characters.
I think that's what yeah. It was too big.
Wasn't enough time for the
Yeah.
original Rey, for example, to focus just on her and things like that.
But I even feel like the original Star Wars was very
Did the same thing?
no. I feel like it kind of like was very minimal in a way.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? But like now it's like we're trying to catch up to the other stories. We're like, why do we have to worry about those stories anymore? Why can't we find something within the universe and like focus on this family who's like poor,
Yeah,
and trying to live within this world? And
I think you're saying to grab the essence of what the original Star Wars was, because if you think
Maybe.
about A New Hope, we spent the first 15 minutes following R2D2 and C3PO in the desert. We haven't even met Luke yet for
Right.
15 minutes of the movie. He's the
Right.
main character. He's our hero. And then when we do meet Luke, it's a really slow burn. He has a conversation with an old man, talks about the Force. No one knows what that is. And it's very gradual. It's a slow build.
exactly. Yeah.
And it's just kind of, if you feel at one with the character, I guess more character driven is what you're
And then like
talking
if
about.
like also if you put yourself back in that time when it came out, maybe this was kind of like an indie film in a way. It's very much not anymore because it's
every Star Wars film was independent until Disney bought it,
I think that's one. Yeah.
since they were all funded by George Lucas. Yeah, I think that's one thing that makes it different. That kind of goes into one of the things I wanted to talk about, which was production value.
Oof.
Because obviously the Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, and Rogue One and Solo have all had the biggest production values out of everything that has ever been Star Wars. And I wanted to ask you if you think that's what makes a movie better or worse, is production value, is sets, is production design, is costume, things like that. If we look at The Empire Strikes Back, which is said to be the best of the best
Okay.
and everyone's favorite Star Wars movie,
Nice.
you could probably count on one hand how many locations there are in that movie, how many sets there are. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the swamp planet of Dagobah. We have the Bespin, which is the Cloud City, where Luke and Vader fight each other and he loses his hand, and the Hoth planet, a couple others, not very many. But then when we get to a movie like The Last Jedi, which is also the second installment to a trilogy, that's why I picked it. We have, I think when they were shooting that movie, they said they had 50 different sound stages for one movie, which is insane. So when it comes to production value, how do you view that from like Star Wars and also your own sets and things like that?
I think it just really, that's so interesting because like as my mind is like working right now, I'm just thinking of like movies that I love and like locations wise of like how many locations are within the story, and it is kind of smaller. I feel maybe it's more so the story that's what's important, and because of the story it might just push the production value, if that makes sense. So like if you're telling like a story that's like maybe 2 hours, right, you don't have time to be in so many locations because like there's no point, and you kind of rush the story instead of like sitting in that location and sitting in that time in that moment. So production value I love, right? I love when I'm trying to think of a movie that like has amazing, like I think we were just talking about like Pan's Labyrinth when you guys were watching, like that production value is like amazing. Like even Crimson Peak, like the production value of that is amazing, but like there's not that many locations. Yeah, because they're really just telling the story, and also the location is also part of the character as well, right? And that's something that when I want to tell stories, I want to really make sure we honor that location and we honor it as a character. So like if you're going to like one planet to another planet to another planet to a moon to a ship to a star, you don't get time to like learn the culture of that location. You don't get time.
That is true. If you think about that, in Star Wars, we spend a lot of time in space, especially the original trilogy, whether it's dogfights, whether it's traveling from one planet to another. And if you look at it from a producer's point of view, if someone came up to you and they were like, I'm going to make this thing called Star Wars, and it's never existed before, and you're reading the script and it's saying, a couple scenes in space, like half the movie is shot in space. Well, you're thinking as a producer and production value, it's all black. How's an audience going to connect with a completely blank slate and just a couple white dots and ships, right? That's hard to grasp. But the story of Star Wars is so good, that you build in your own head what's really important, and that is a good story and good characters that serve your story. So then the production doesn't matter at all, because it also,
which is why, like, when everything was low budget, like, like there were probably some things, like, as an audience back then that you were watching, you were like, oh, okay, like, you know what I mean? But like, the story was
we're
so
spoiled
good.
now.
Like, even now, like, watching it, like, I still love it because the story is so good. It has nothing to do with the production value. Like, that's just the cherry on top, right?
Right.
Like, again, like Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, is because I love that so much, is because of the location. Like, I want to visit it. I want to be there. Like, same thing with Harry Potter. Like, like, that's why they have theme parks around it. But I don't know. Like, I feel like the newer Star Wars, at least, like, it's like so hard to like fall in love with certain things about it, is because, like, I feel like it's not really focused on the story like it used to be. But like,
well, I mean, that's apparent, because JJ said in an interview recently that they had no plan when they were making these 3 films, and that he wished they did, because they didn't know where they were going with this story. The last thing I want to ask you before we end today's episode is just your thoughts on sound in cinema, and then also thoughts on CG versus practical.
Yeah, sound. Amazing. Sound is a amazing thing. Only
all right, we're done. Thank you guys.
Good night. Only because, like, I'm finding out, like, how important sound is, and I'm guessing you as well.
No.
But like, with my short, right, it's a horror film. It's a psychological thriller, and I don't think it will work if we didn't have an amazing sound engineer. Like, it's the story is great, but what's going to push it is the sound. Like, in like any horror film, like, the sound just like makes it. But and then and like you're finding that out too. I guess.
And even like today, though, we're lucky to have archives or websites or rooms that have tons of sounds we can use. We don't have to make it anymore.
God
really,
for Lucas Studios. Really.
And there's the sound designer of Star Wars, the original, his name is Ben Burtt. There's tons of documentaries you can find on him. He is the pioneer of modern day sound engineering in filmmaking, and he created every single sound you ever heard in Star Wars from nothing by exactly by creating, like, blending this different sounds from modern day worlds into, creating new things, and very interesting stuff. But it's created and then because of the new sound engineering and sound effects they did for Star Wars, they created THX, the big thing you would hear before every movie, and so they created new sound systems for movie theaters, and that amplified the movie going experience.
You know how many movies I have watched, and at the very end of credits, it's like George Lucas Studios. It's like, of course the sound, like,
everything, whether it's VFX, it has the Lucasfilm logo, or whether it's
a lot of Marvel movies, I think.
I mean, even Pixar. George Lucas created Pixar with Steve Jobs. That was their baby together. So it's crazy the impact that Star Wars has had on filmmaking, whether it was direct or indirect. And the last thing I want to ask you about is CG, practical versus CG. How you think it can work? How you think it doesn't?
I get it. I understand, like, CGI is cheaper. I get it. Like, practical effect is expensive. There's more risk. I hate it so much. Marvel does a really good job, but it pisses me off. It pisses me off when they, like, have a full-on costume, and, like, Spider-Man is in this, like, nice ass, like, excuse me for my language, like, Spidey suit, and then they CGI over it, and it's like, what the? Like why? Like why? It really makes me upset. Only because like it's going to ruin film in the future. The fact that they don't have to be in the same room anymore to act. Like
I have a great example
like,
of like the suit thing is Shazam. In the most recent Shazam movie, he had like this logo on him, the lightning bolt, that was a practical effect, and it was real light coming out of his costume.
Right.
And for the second one, Zachary Levi said that the suit was uncomfortable because of the light, and he asked if they could just do it CG, and they had to conform to the actor's needs. And now they're doing a CGI light coming from his, and the original looks so cool.
It does look. He's super nice.
The entire
Hopefully,
Zachary Levi
super nice, dude. Like
we went to that together.
Yeah, we went to that.
That's right. That's right. But that's one thing that, because I think the practical suit looked really, really good. And it wasn't just the logo shining through.
I love how goofy it looks. Like I feel like it's supposed to, and now it looks too good. Like, it looks too good, right?
Well, what's also funny about it is it looks like they stuffed him with pillows, but he's really that jacked.
He's just jacked.
That's what's funny. He should play Conan. I think he's too kind of got a goofy face. He can't play Conan.
No,
Never mind.
He can't. But that's why it works, right? That's why Shazam works.
And at last I see the light.
I hate that movie. But no, I'm like, I don't like Tango. I'm not a fan of Tango. I've fallen asleep to it.
Chris is upset.
I'm so sorry. Wait. Oh yeah, no. It's your biopic. I get it. No, I have fallen asleep to it like multiple times. That's a good way of looking at it.
All right, so we have to wrap up for today. But are there any other last thoughts you have on filmmaking, on Star Wars filmmaking, or just words of wisdom for our audience in the world?
No one knows what they're doing. You know, if you have a vision, if you like something that you want to see on film, like it's art, just do it. Don't listen to anyone else because it's your vision, and you're right.
To add on to that, I think yes, I agree. I mean, if an idea, I think whether it's an idea, there was this great book that Aisa gave me. I forget what it's called, but it basically talks about the concept of an idea and how if you got an idea, let's say an iPhone never existed. If you got an idea for an iPhone and you were like, oh my God, this could be really cool. I can make an iPhone and people will go out and buy it or whatever. But you're like, no one would ever fund it. No one believes that this could be a real thing. Well, then you put that dream aside. That idea is just going to pass on to someone else. And then someone like Steve Jobs,
someone who's worthy of that idea, is going to.
Yeah. An idea will always be made. It's just, it passes on. It's like a gene. And it just depends. If you have an idea, take that chance while you have it. So I totally agree. Just if you have an idea,
just do it.
Go out there, do something.
Make the mistakes, but sometimes the mistakes are the best thing that you can make.
I agree. And it looks like this is the perfect time to wrap up because my camera has just frozen. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you're new to the YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. New videos every week. We're also started just releasing deleted scenes from original Star Wars movies, so check those out and be sure to list or follow us, rate, review on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Overcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you are watching this live, tonight is the Loki finale. Me and Chris will be watching that, and we'll be talking about it really soon, maybe even tomorrow. I don't know if we have time, but we'll see. So you guys have a great rest of your week. We will see you very soon. And now, somehow, some way, somewhere this week, may the Force be with you. West Side Story.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.